He returned to school as a gangster boss with an army behind him. But just 2 years ago, he was sitting alone in his room writing his final goodbye letter. He was ready to end it all until a face on the news changed everything. A student who destroyed 7 of his own bullies stared into the camera and gave him a simple order: don't end your own life, end theirs. Those 5 words didn't just change him, they unleashed him. That night, he didn't just fight back. He sent his tormentor to the emergency room and accepted his exile to the lawless streets. Most kids wouldn't last a week out there, but he lasted 2 years. Now he is back, but the broken kid who begged for mercy is dead. In his place stands a monster with scars, soldiers, and a list of names, and the hunt has already begun. Imagine sitting in your final exam surrounded by silence, but instead of answering the questions, you are busy writing your final goodbye letter. This is the life of Juho. He isn't studying because he knows he won't be alive next week. On his birthday, his gift wasn't a cake. It was a brutal, merciless beating from the school's alpha predator, Dwan. They treated him like human livestock, forcing him to eat food off the floor while snapping photos for social media. Jiho wrote it all down in his will. He knew humans were supposed to be the most adaptable species on Earth, yet no matter how many times he was beaten and humiliated, he could never get used to it. The bullies led by Dowan treated him like he was less than human. Like some stray animal they could kick around for fun. But the physical abuse wasn't even the worst part. What truly broke him was the way everyone looked at him. The mocking laughter echoing the halls. Standing before them, Jiho felt completely exposed and powerless. It made him despise his existence more than ever. That's why Jiho wanted to leave this world peacefully. Instead of solving for X, he was busy solving for exit. He spent the entire exam period penning his masterpiece of a self-cancellation essay. He actually felt proud of it, joking that if there was a Pulitzer Prize for depressing farewell letters, he'd be taking home the gold. Sitting there, Jiho imagined what would happen after his death. Maybe Dowan would finally pay for everything he'd done. Even though Jiho wouldn't be alive to see it, the thought alone brought him some comfort. As for his family, his older brother was a bookworm who would probably just memorize vocabulary at the funeral instead of mourning. His younger sister would be glued to her phone, and his parents wouldn't have to worry about their useless failing son anymore. After the exam, Jiho dragged himself home. Before ending it all, he figured he should at least say goodbye to his family. But when he got there, dinner was painfully silent. No one talked to anyone. Jiho turned to his brother and asked where their mom was. His brother barely looked up from his textbook and answered dismissively that she was probably coming home late. Then he stood up, finished with his meal, and went straight back to studying. Jiho glanced at his father, ready to confess everything, but his cold, indifferent dad cut him off immediately, saying he was trying to watch the news and didn't want to be bothered. Jiho just lowered his head and obeyed. Then something on the TV caught his attention. The news was reporting on a student who had been arrested for ending 7 classmates at a high school. The media dubbed him the devil. Standing in front of reporters, the boy showed absolutely no remorse. He boldly denied being a monster, claiming that if his victims hadn't mocked his family and made his life a living hell, they wouldn't have paid such a steep price. Those words ignited a fire inside Jiho. He clenched his teeth, remembering every single person who had tormented him. Meanwhile, the victims' families were furious at the devil's baseless accusations. But the boy didn't stop there. He went even further, calling on every bullied student to rise up and fight back just like he did. He told them never to give up on their lives because that would only make things worse for themselves and their families. No matter what happens, they had to survive. And if they wanted to disappear, they should take their tormentors with them instead. Those words woke Jiho up. He realized something crucial. Why should he be the one to disappear when he hadn't done anything wrong? The real problem was those animals who tormented him. That night, Jiho couldn't sleep. He was glued to his phone, researching everything about Devil's case. Hundreds of scenarios played out in his mind where he became a monster himself. But Jiho knew he didn't have the guts for that. He broke down, crying at his own weakness. If nothing changed, his life would stay miserable forever. All he wanted was a normal life. Why was that so impossible? He prayed for someone, anyone, to deal with Dowan for him, but he knew no one else would do it. So Jiho found a screwdriver and started practicing on his pillow, stabbing it over and over. His face twisted into something terrifying as he made his decision. The one who needed to be punished wasn't him. It was Dowan. The next morning, Jiho went to school as usual, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. He'd spent all night thinking about how to take down Dowan, yet his body still trembled from fear and habit. when Dawan suddenly appeared and slammed something hard against Jiho's head. Laughing sadistically, Jiho's hand instinctively moved toward the screwdriver hidden in his pocket. He was ready to stab that bastard right then and there. But when Dawan leaned down to see what Jiho was doing, their eyes met and all of Jiho's resolve vanished. Fear took over. After being tormented for so long, just seeing Dawan's face made him freeze in terror. The screwdriver slipped from his trembling hand just like his will to fight. And of course, Dawan proceeded to beat him mercilessly. After the beating, Jiho hid the weapon back in his desk, deciding to wait for another opportunity. He endured the pain without fighting back, but Dawan wasn't satisfied yet. He announced that they couldn't let Jiho's birthday pass normally, so he invited his friends to throw a little party after school. He told Jiho to follow him when classes ended. Jiho's face went pale with sweat, fear flooding through him. After school, Dawan grabbed him by the neck and dragged him to an abandoned construction site. Food and drinks were already laid out for the birthday celebration. When Jiho saw alcohol, he stammered that he'd never drunk before. Dawan didn't care. He threatened that if Jiho didn't drink, he wouldn't be going home tonight. The horrifying concoction Dawan prepared included soda mixed with alcohol, spit, dirt, cigarette ash, and instant noodles. When the disgusting drink was shoved in front of Jiho, he tried to refuse, but Dawan punched him in the face before he could finish his sentence. Dawan's terrifying expression made it clear: drink or get beaten to death. Trapped with no way out, Jiho took a gulp of the vile mixture and immediately vomited. It was beyond disgusting. But Dawan's sadism wasn't satisfied. He laughed and told Jiho to lick up what he'd just thrown up or else he'd make another cup for him to drink. Jiho wasn't going home until he finished everything. By dusk, Jiho had consumed multiple rounds of this nightmare fuel, but Dawan still wasn't done. He sent his lackeys to buy more supplies, so the fun could continue. Jiho's head was spinning and his stomach was churning violently. In that moment, he couldn't take it anymore. He didn't want to be humiliated like a dog ever again, so he jumped up and ran. Dawan just smirked. This kid wanted another beating. Jiho didn't get far before Dawan caught him and slammed him to the ground. Dawan pinned him down and started pounding his face over and over while Jiho could raise his arms defensively. Jiho thought he was going to die. After a while, Dawan stopped and grabbed Jiho's head, demanding he stand up. Dawan made it clear that Jiho wasn't getting off easy today. As he was dragged along like a dog, Jiho thought to himself, why did he have to live like this? Why couldn't he fight back even once? He was always terrified when he saw Dawan's face. Every time his mind went blank and his body froze completely, then it hit him. The solution wasn't courage, it was basic geometry. If he couldn't look at Dawan's face, he'd just relocate Dawan's body. Jiho shoved him forward right as the legendary truck Kun arrived for a scheduled delivery. Usually, this is the part where the bully gets sent to a fantasy world to become a demon king. But in this universe, physics just says no and Dawan gets flattened like a pancake. Satisfying? Yes. Legal? Absolutely not. Back at the construction site, Dawan's two lackeys were waiting with the food they'd bought, laughing about how humiliated Jiho had been. Suddenly, they heard a commotion and pushed through the crowd. When they saw what was in front of them, their faces went pale with horror. Meanwhile, Jiho was running for his life, bumping into people on the street. No one dared confront him because the look on his face was absolutely terrifying. When Jiho finally snapped back to reality, his anger faded and his arms started trembling. He just pushed down in front of a truck. He would start over from here. No matter what it took, he was going to survive in this cruel, unforgiving world. That night, Jiho lay in bed with the covers pulled over his head, drowning in guilt. He kept thinking he should turn himself in because this secret wouldn't stay hidden for long. He replayed the moment when Dawan got hit, how he'd immediately bolted without looking back. His inner thoughts tore him apart. Part of him believed what he did was too extreme. The other part insisted that if he hadn't done it, he would have been the one to die instead. In the end, accepted one truth. He really did want revenge. The next day, Jiho assumed it would be his last day as a student, so he walked to school slowly, ignoring everything around him. His mind was flooded with images of Dawan. He wanted to enter the classroom without seeing that face. As he climbed the stairs, nothing unusual happened. Jiho started wondering if maybe Dawan's condition was more critical than he thought, which made his injuries worse. For a brief moment, his face lit up with hope. If that was true, then maybe he wouldn't be bullied anymore. But then, he crushed that thought himself. He'd committed a crime. It was only a matter of time before he got arrested. Standing in front of the classroom door, Jiho was too scared to open it. Horrifying scenarios played out in his mind. What if there was a squad of officers waiting inside to arrest him? He nervously cracked the door open and peeked inside. The classroom looked completely normal, nothing like the nightmare he'd imagined. The usual chatter filled the room. Model students were studying diligently. Everything was the same except for one thing: Dowen's seat was empty. Class started and the teacher stood at the front with sad news. Last night, Dowen had been in a traffic accident on his way home from school. He was currently in a coma with severe injuries. The class erupted in whispers. The teacher cleared his throat and called for order, then continued. According to the police investigation, the accident happened because Dowen had crossed the street illegally. In that moment, everything exploded in Jiho's mind. Did this mean he was off the hook? He clenched his jaw and covered his face, trying to calm himself down. He refused to let himself think that way because that would make him no different from people like Dowen. So Jiho decided he'd turn himself in to ease his guilt. But then he thought about enjoying this peaceful life for just a few more days. A life without violence, without threats, without worrying about facing Dowen after school. Jiho cried for his fate. Life was so beautiful and now he had to give it up. While he was sobbing, two of Dowen's lackeys approached. One of them pointed at Jiho and accused him of pushing Dowen. Jiho immediately stopped crying, his face frozen in shock. The other lackey pulled his friend back and apologized, saying his friend was just being nosy. But as they walked away, the first guy insisted he'd seen Jiho and Dawon together yesterday. Ignoring their whispers, Jiho looked around the classroom. The atmosphere had completely changed. The kids who used to bully him weren't bothering him anymore. It turned out that without the alpha dog, the pack of puppies was useless. The classroom had become peaceful. Standing by the window, Jiho thought to himself, if everything was changing for the better, didn't that mean he'd actually done something good? If fate had arranged it this way, then whatever happens, happens. He'd accept it. But right at that moment, Jiho spotted a police car pulling into the school gate. Everyone started buzzing, wondering who the cops were here to arrest. Then someone opened the door and called out Jiho's name loudly, making him flinch. The homeroom teacher was summoning him to the staff office for something urgent. Shock was written all over his face. Even though he'd mentally prepared himself, the blow still hit like a ton of bricks. According to the officer, Jiho was being arrested for attempted murder. Everything around him went dark. The homeroom teacher tried to defend him, insisting the police must be mistaken since they'd said it was an accident, but the evidence was undeniable. CCTV footage showed Jiho doing the push, and context apparently doesn't exist in the legal system. The sweet dream was over. It's truly amazing how the school system works. You can be used as human furniture for 3 years and everyone sleeps. But the second you fight back, they summon the FBI, the Avengers, and the Supreme Court to expel you. Justice isn't blind, it's just really stupid. Jiho started crying, but not out of regret for what he'd done. He cried because society only saw one side of the story. They condemned him harshly. Every accusation felt like a massive stone crushing his heart. The day of the interrogation arrived. The court ruled that Jiho's crime constituted attempted murder, which was equivalent to actual murder. But luckily for Jiho, considering that he'd been a victim of Dowen's bullying and that the incident occurred after he'd been forced to drink until he was intoxicated, the court decided to reduce his sentence. He was given 2 years of probation so Jiho wouldn't be sent to a detention center. But that wasn't the worst part. His own family turned their backs on him. His father coldly told him to go handle his school problems himself. A disciplinary meeting was held at the school and every accusation was aimed at the bully boy. He was seen as a disgrace to the institution. He wasn't allowed to defend himself or explain his actions. The conclusion was simple, effective immediately. Jiho was expelled. His face went blank as if he couldn't believe his own ears. He walked slowly down the hallway, ignoring how many people were staring and gossiping about him. Some were confused, some mocked him, and some even sympathized. Jiho heard it all. He clenched his fists in frustration. These people were heartless demons. He didn't understand how they could say such things when he'd been a victim every single day. If school was hell, then the only place left for him was supposed to be his home. But life wasn't a dream. Jiho knelt at his front door, but his father turned away and told him to get out of the house immediately. Those words struck like lightning. Tears and snot streamed down Jiho's face. He stood up and walked out. As he left, he glanced back at his family. The atmosphere was so grim, it was suffocating. That night, it poured rain. With nowhere to go, Jiho just wandered aimlessly through the streets. He still didn't understand how things had ended up like this. He never wanted to make a big deal out of anything. He just wanted to live a normal life, but both school and even his own family had abandoned him. Lost and directionless, Jiho turned into a dark alley. Suddenly, a group of thugs appeared in front of him. They were the same crew that used to hang out with Day One and bully him. Jiho never imagined they still wouldn't leave him alone. The four delinquents sneered. One of them said Jiho thought he could go home peacefully after what he did to Day One. They needed to invite some friends over for a proper beating. Then all four of them charged at him. Blows rained down on Jiho's frail body like a storm. He could only cover his head and take the hits. It felt like every bone in his body was being shattered. He couldn't fight back against four tall, strong guys. After the beating, the leader stepped on Jiho's head and said that no matter how badly Dowan had treated him, what Jiho did was pure evil. So they were going to make him apologize on Dowan's behalf. The leader demanded Jiho bark like a dog as an apology. If he refused, they'd beat him until he couldn't move anymore. In that moment, Jiho thought about his miserable fate and how unfair this world was. Dowan had knocked him down dozens, maybe hundreds of times, and nothing ever happened to him. But Jiho defended himself once, and now he was the villain. Jiho screamed. He couldn't understand what he'd done wrong. The real dogs were these pack animals following orders. Hearing those disrespectful words come out of Jiho's mouth, the guy in the yellow jacket lost it. He bent down, grabbed Jiho by the throat, and started punching him in the face repeatedly without mercy. He wanted to beat Jiho until he shut his mouth for good. In that life-threatening moment, Jiho's survival instinct kicked in. He reached to the side and grabbed a brick. The thug realized what was happening, but it was too late to dodge. The brick smashed directly into his head. A sickening crack echoed through the alley. Jiho went berserk. He sat up on top of the guy and used the brick to do exactly what had just been done to him. It was a horrifying scene, blood everywhere. The yellow jacket thug was now unconscious, clutching his head. In that instant, Jiho knew what he needed to do. The other guys started getting scared because Jiho was still holding the brick and staring at them with intense focus. A bold idea formed in his mind. He wanted to kill every single person who'd ever bullied him. Only then could he finally live in peace. But life wasn't that simple. Outnumbered and outmatched, Jiho's face twisted in desperation. The reality was he lost in both quantity and quality. It was a 5-on-1 fight. Jiho had a brick and they had bats. Jiho's expression turned savage. Without a word, they all rushed him at once, each attacking from a different angle. Jiho could only cover his head again, but this time was different from the usual script. He knew he had to fight back. Jiho swung the brick wildly, hitting whoever he could. Surprisingly, it worked. One guy got hit in the hand, dropped his bat in pain, and stumbled to the side groaning. In return, Jiho took a bat to the back of his neck and collapsed. They beat him until they were satisfied. After a while, two of them grabbed Jiho by the arms and forced him to stand. The leader grabbed his hair and demanded to know why Jiho wouldn't answer him. Did Jiho think he wouldn't do anything? He told Jiho to look up and bark like before. The moment Jiho raised his blood-soaked face with that terrifying expression, the leader flinched and blurted out that Jiho was insane. The creepy look in Jiho's eyes pissed him off even more. He jabbed his bat directly into Jiho's face, thinking that would be the end of it. But then, a new character stepped out, holding a cup of instant noodles. Casually asked the thugs what they were doing in someone else's house, completely ignoring the fact that a kid was being turned into hamburger meat on the floor. This guy had his priorities straight. Ramen first, homicide prevention second. For a moment, the thugs were confused about where this random homeless guy came from and why he was ruining their fun. They kept their arrogant attitude. The leader asked if this guy was claiming the construction site belonged to him. He called him a bum and told him to get lost while they were still being nice. Stranger stayed completely calm and insisted he wasn't joking. This was his place. He pointed at the brick on the ground and said it was his pillow. Too bad it was now covered in blood. The purple-haired thug didn't buy it and moved closer to intimidate him. The stranger turned around and started walking away. Before the thug could feel smug about it, the cup of noodles flew straight into his face. The stranger jumped and delivered a perfect kick right to his head. The horrifying scene left everyone frozen, but their pack mentality kicked in and they all charged. The outcome was brutal. It seemed like they'd mess with the wrong person. In just a few minutes, each one of them was taken down effortlessly. When the leader saw his crew completely wrecked, he got furious. It was his turn now. He thought he'd do better, but with a single kick, he lost all ability to fight back. Jiho couldn't believe his eyes. Even though this guy's fighting style was a bit strange, he had to admit the man was incredibly strong. He'd single-handedly destroyed Darwin's entire crew with ease. The scene shifted to the aftermath. The leader was getting his ear twisted and his nose flicked mercilessly. The brutal nose flicks made him beg for mercy, but the stranger just smiled and told him not to worry. He wouldn't die from a nosebleed. Watching the beatdown, Jiho felt deeply satisfied. Jiho slowly approached the stranger and spoke up. Even though he didn't know why this guy had helped him, he was genuinely grateful. But wait, there seemed to be a misunderstanding. The guy clarified that he just wanted to kick everyone out so he could eat his noodles in peace. But the cup he'd thrown at that thug's face meant there were no noodles left to eat. Feeling rejected, Jiho's face fell as he started walking away. Suddenly, he turned back and tapped the stranger on the shoulder. Jiho begged him to help make him strong. But before he could finish his sentence, the guy got annoyed and almost punched Jiho in the face. Jiho squeezed his eyes shut in fear, still pleading. He said he'd just listen once and he'd buy the guy new instant noodles. Hearing the word food, the stranger immediately agreed. Jiho let him to buy a replacement cup of noodles for the one that got ruined earlier. After hearing Jiho's entire story, including the part about pushing Darwin, the stranger laughed heartily and said he was starting to like Jiho. But when it came to teaching Jiho how to fight, the guy said no. Jiho looked surprised. The stranger explained that aside from it being a hassle, there was a more important reason. Jiho had never fought before and lived a normal life. He was like a flower that had been protected in a greenhouse. If he wanted to learn how to fight, he'd have to follow this guy around. But going out and getting into real brawls would definitely get Jiho killed. After hearing that, Jiho practically shouted that he could do it. No matter what it took, he'd adapt. He begged him to teach him. The stranger ignored his plea and turned to walk away. He had the decency to warn Jiho that he wasn't ready yet. He should just go home, and if Jiho kept following him, shouldn't blame him for what happened next. Once again, Jiho fell into despair. He just wanted to change his life. Why was it so difficult? The next day, Jiho still wasn't ready to give up. He secretly followed the stranger around. His only thought was that if the guy wouldn't teach him, he'd copy everything guy did on his own. Jiho had been stalking him all day, documenting every action and job the stranger did. Jiho realized this guy lived like a wild animal. It was an eye-opening experience. So there really were people who lived like this. Then Jiho started doubting himself. Would following this guy around actually help? Before he could finish that thought, Jiho witnessed the stranger beating up an entire group of people. The leader was getting his mouth squeezed while begging for mercy, but the stranger had no intention of letting him go. The screams echoed through the alley. The guy's teeth were probably a bloody mess by now. Watching everything unfold, Jiho thought that if he did exactly what this guy did, he'd finally be able to get his revenge. Meanwhile, the stranger had clearly noticed that Jiho had been tailing him. The same script played out. Whatever the guy did, Jiho followed and copied. Eventually, they ended up in a small alley, and the stranger couldn't take it anymore. He turned around and asked why Jiho had been following him since yesterday. Did he still want to learn how to fight so he could get revenge? Caught red-handed, Jiho froze for a second, then looked up with an eager expression and answered that, of course he did. The stranger laughed in a mischievous way. He agreed to teach Jiho how to fight. Jiho was shocked. He didn't understand why the guy suddenly agreed so easily after rejecting him the day before. Jiho thought he was going to learn some martial arts. Instead, the stranger led him to Park Jong-hoon's place. That was the same guy who'd beaten Jiho at the construction site. Remembering that day, Jiho had smashed a brick over one of them. It was a decent decision, but it wasn't enough. He told him that if he wanted him to teach him, he should beat the hell out of Park Jong-hoon. Meanwhile, Jong-hoon was furious. He called his crew and mobilized everyone to hunt down Jiho and the guy who'd attacked him. But somehow, Jiho was already perched on top of a wall behind him like a wolf stalking its prey. And the stranger was leaning casually below, a cigarette still in his mouth, completely unnoticed. Back at school one day, Jong-hoon had suddenly approached Jiho and apologized for everything they'd done. Things like pulling his pants down in front of girls or forcing him to drink toilet water. Jong-hoon was a grade A actor. His face looked so genuinely sad that Jiho actually believed him and extended his hand to shake and make peace. But the moment their hands connected, Jong-hoon pulled a dirty trick. He squeezed Jiho's hand with all his strength. Felt like his hand was being crushed. Jong-hoon was tall and athletic. He used to be on the baseball team before getting kicked out for assaulting other members. His grip strength was on another level. That was why Ji-ho could never fight back against him. Ji-ho's scream of pain echoed, but Jong-hoon showed no mercy. Instead, he threatened that from now on, he'd apologize to Ji-ho like this every single day. Back in the present, Ji-ho hesitated. He kept telling himself not to be scared. If he just stuck to the plan, everything would be fine. From the top of wall, Ji-ho jumped down and kicked Jong-hoon square in the back, sending him face first into the ground. The stranger watching from the side had to admit he was impressed by that move. Ji-ho landed safely. He thought he'd succeeded and felt a rush of joy, but that happiness was short-lived. Jong-hoon punched Ji-ho straight in the face without holding back. Ji-ho's entire body trembled in pain. Jong-hoon rubbed his neck and grimaced, wondering who it was. Then he realized it was none other than the loser Ji-ho, and just like that, Jong-hoon unleashed a brutal beatdown. Ji-ho couldn't fight back at all. The stranger watching had an annoyed expression on his face. The first move looked decent, but now it was over. He thought to himself that there was no need to test Ji-ho any further. This beating hurt worse than all the previous ones combined. While that was happening, Jong-hoon kicked Ji-ho right in the ribs. He arrogantly looked down on Ji-ho, reminding him that he used to be a baseball player. There was no way someone as small and weak as Ji-ho could do anything to him. As he slowly walked toward Ji-ho, a plastic bag suddenly flew into Jong-hoon's face. Ji-ho had gotten up to fight back. This surprised the stranger a bit. Seizing the opportunity while Jong-hoon couldn't see, Ji-ho charged forward like he was flying. But instead of throwing punches, he just wrapped his arms around Jong-hoon's stomach, trying to tackle him to the ground. The result was that Ji-ho got countered again. Jong-hoon slammed him against the wall and kept hitting him. Earlier, Ji-ho had been studying the stranger's fighting style, but it was completely useless. When Jong-hoon pinned him against the wall, Ji-ho even tried to poke his eyes with 2 fingers. But once again, it failed. Ji-ho grabbed those 2 fingers and bent them backward, making Ji-ho scream in pain. Ji-ho was absolutely livid. He couldn't believe that someone as pathetic as Ji-ho, who was only fit to lick his shoes, had dared to fight back. His face twisted with rage. Meanwhile, Ho wasn't backing down either. He changed. He was no longer the scared kid who would just retreat. He started talking back, saying he couldn't understand what he'd done wrong. The real dogs were pack animals like them. That attitude drove Jong-hoon insane. He started slapping Ji-ho's face over and over, demanding he drop that look in his eyes. Ji-ho's head was spinning, but he only had one thought. He wanted these people to suffer. Because of them, his entire life had been turned upside down. Earlier, Ji-ho had asked the stranger why he had to learn by fighting Jong-hoon. If he could beat him, then why the hell would he even seek help from the stranger? The stranger didn't answer, just turned and walked away, reminding Ji-ho one more time that if he wasn't ready yet, he should go home. Ji-ho told him that he has 0 chance whining against Jong-hoon. The stranger just smirked, saying that in a street fight, everything is possible. No tactics are needed, just use everything you can to win. Back to the present, the stranger was about to leave since Ji-ho was already cooked. But then he heard a strange noise behind him. He turned around, his face filled with disbelief at what Ji-ho had done. Ji-ho pulled the ultimate move. He pulled out a newspaper-wrapped knife and pointed it straight at Jong-hoon's stomach. Jong-hoon looked terrified. Combined with the insane expression on Ji-ho's face, he froze completely. Seizing the opportunity, Ji-ho kicked Jong-hoon to the ground. This made sense. Even if you're confident in your strength, when facing a lunatic holding a knife, who could stay calm? Jong-hoon tried to run, but ended up in a dead-end alley. He turned around in fear to see Ji-ho approaching like the Grim Reaper, knife in hand, coming to collect his soul. Now it was Ji-ho's turn to counterattack. He kept hitting Jong-hoon on the head while Jong-hoon could only shield himself in fear, worried that one wrong move and Ji-ho would stab him. After getting beaten for a while, Jong-hoon raised his hands in surrender and begged for mercy. It seemed like his ribs were broken. He apologized for bullying Ji-ho. But was it really going to be that easy? Ji-ho kept charging at him, continuing the beating. What Jong-hoon was enduring now was nothing compared to what Ji-ho had suffered 100 times over. Ji-ho had lived in humiliation, half dead. Even though he'd knelt and begged, who had shown him mercy? Despair flooded him to the point where Ji-ho could only think about death. Thinking about these things made Ji-ho lose focus for a moment. Jong-hoon quickly grabbed his arm and tried to wrestle the knife away. With overwhelming strength, Jong-hoon successfully regained the advantage. He showed no mercy, just like Ji-ho hadn't, and directly stabbed downward with the knife. The stranger watching was shocked, but no disaster occurred. When the knife went down toward Ji's leg, it revealed its true form. It was just a ruler wrapped in newspaper. Realizing he'd been tricked, Jong-hoon became even more furious. The stranger observing the fight gained a new perspective on Ji-hoon. It turned out Ji-hoon had been following his teachings from start to finish. But to think of using a ruler disguised as a knife in that moment showed quick thinking and exceptional adaptability. However, it still wasn't enough. Once again, Ji-ho took brutal punches from Jong-hoon. His rage reached its peak. He didn't care whether Ji-ho passed out or died from his punches because he was the crazy Park Jong-hoon from the baseball team and he was pounding away. Then he felt something wet on his head. Thinking it was rain, he looked up only to realize the stranger had poured some iced tea on his head. With his blood boiling and his mind clouded, Jong-hoon no longer remembered that the guy in front of him was actually the one who beat the hell out of him before. He charged at the stranger, but before he could even get close, he got kicked and sent flying. After dealing with Jong-hoon, the stranger looked at Ji-ho with regret and said he'd failed. He couldn't teach him how to fight. Hearing this, Ji-ho couldn't contain his frustration. He was so close to winning. Ji-ho punched the ground, showing his helplessness. Maybe he'd be bullied by them his whole life. Suddenly, the stranger crouched down in front of Ji-ho and asked if he still wanted to get stronger. If so, he'd give him one last chance. But this time, it would be so much harder. Could he do it? Hearing this, Ji-ho burst into tears because once again, he had a chance to change his fate. After that, the stranger led Ji-ho somewhere without saying a word. When Ji-ho finally asked, the stranger replied by asking if Ji-ho thought the school kids were the worst thugs in the world. If so, that thinking was too simple. School kids weren't even close to these guys. The stranger's face became unusually serious. He told Ji-ho that leaving school wasn't the end. There was still the dark life of society out there. Street thugs with nothing to lose were the most dangerous. The stranger's expression became grim when mentioning them, and where they were standing was the center, the gathering place of these dangerous people. Ji-ho flinched nervously. He still didn't understand why the guy had brought him here or what for. Ji-ho was led to a house, and before he could do anything, the stranger kicked him inside with a sinister smile, telling him to find a way to survive here. The door slowly closed, leaving Ji-ho confused. Suddenly, 3 people appeared, 2 guys and 1 girl. Ji-ho's face went pale. The leader seemed to be the red-haired guy. He sat arrogantly in a chair and asked Ji-ho if he came here to live and learn how to fight. Ji-ho, kneeling on the ground, immediately answered yes. The group quickly realized Johan was the one who dragged Ji-ho in. But after a quick interrogation to see if the kid had any skills, the verdict was unanimous. Ji-ho was absolutely useless. The redhead, Jiob, wanted to kick him out immediately, but he couldn't defy Johan's decision. So that night, Jiob was tossed into the laundry room to sleep. Jiob smirked and told him not to get comfortable. He would have to repay them with his body. Ji-ho turned pale, thinking the absolute worst, but relax. Ji-ho just has terrible phrasing. He simply meant manual labor. From that day on, Ji-ho became the house cleaner, scrubbing toilets and mopping floors, but surprisingly, he didn't complain. Actually felt lucky to have a roof over his head without getting beaten up. It really tells you how tragic his life is that he considers scrubbing a gang's toilet a massive upgrade from going to high school. Early the next morning, after stepping outside and observing people in this area for a few days, Ji-ho realized they were truly more savage than anyone he'd ever met. He suspected this place gathered all the runaway teenagers in the world. By accident, Ji-ho made eye contact with an extremely tough-looking guy. Ji-ho lowered his head and walked straight ahead while silently praying they'd let him pass. But just as he got close, the guy demanded he stop. This guy picked a fight for no reason, asking if Ji-ho wanted to touch his girlfriend's legs. He demanded an answer, saying if Ji-ho bowed and apologized, he'd consider letting him go. Ji-ho thought to himself that this guy was bullying him to show off in front of his girlfriend. Ji-ho remembered Johan's words about finding a way to survive in this den of street thugs. Seeing Ji-ho's silence, the guy was about to knock him out. When the bag in Ji-ho's hand fell, Ji-ho preemptively punched the guy first. The guy froze, not because he was surprised by Ji-ho, but by who appeared behind him. Ji-ho had been standing behind Ji-ho the whole time. The thug got swatted aside and Ji-ho walked back home with Ji-ho. The thug was furious, but his lackey stopped him, explaining that the people in front of them were part of the Johan family. But the thug still wanted to settle the score with Jaeb and Kim-taek. With a switchblade in hand, he charged straight at Jaeb, but with just one hand, Jaeb pressed his head down to the ground. This shocked everyone. Jaeb's strength was no joke, comparable to Johan's. He was the type to greet people with his fists. Seeing their leader knocked out with one move, the gang immediately ran away. Jaeb sneered, "What a bunch of losers." Jaeb looked back at the guy lying on the ground sweating nervously. He thought to himself, were all of Johan's friends this strong? After a while, the guy who got beaten woke up furious. He could only bang his head against the wall to vent, shouting that he wanted to take out that Jaeb guy and the whole Johan family. Suddenly, a mysterious person appeared and asked if that was true. If so, he'd help this gang of thugs. This shocked the thug. Meanwhile, Job didn't pay much attention to the morning incident. He was sleeping peacefully at home, unaware that outside his window, someone was watching. It was none other than that thug. He'd found a large gas canister and was pumping gas into the house, trying to suffocate everyone. Jiho was sleeping when he suddenly felt the need to use the bathroom. Yawning, he opened the door and the smell of gas hit him directly. Jaeb and the other guy had probably already passed out. Knowing there was no other choice, Jiho had to open the door for ventilation or everyone would suffocate. Jiho rushed toward the door and smashed right into the thug's face. Seeing the person on the ground, Jiho immediately recognized him from this morning. The thug, realizing he'd been caught, scrambled away on all fours. Looking inside the house, Jiho quickly realized the guy was targeting this family. Jiho's face became more panicked than ever. He ran like his life depended on it out of the house. Earlier, he'd moved everyone upstairs, which could help them wake up soon. As for the thug, he ran for a while before stopping, exhausted and gasping for breath. He still didn't know why that kid wasn't sleeping in the same room as the others. Otherwise, he would have successfully eliminated them all. Right then, Jiho appeared out of nowhere. Jiho knew he was useless, but now things were different. What he wanted most was to get rid of trash like this guy. Going back to earlier, Jiho had been following Jaeb around all day. Even though the guy said it was annoying and wanted to get rid of him, Jiho still didn't know why this Jiho kid was so obsessed with learning to fight. Jiho, with a pleading expression, explained that when he saw Jaeb take down those thugs with just one punch, he wished he could do the same. Jaeb hated having Jiho around. He frowned and thought to himself, did this idiot not understand what annoying meant? And where is Johan? Why is he taking so long? He needed to come take this troublesome kid away. Then Job noticed a jump rope nearby. An idea popped into his head. He threw it to Jiho. Jiho didn't have high expectations, so he didn't set a specific number for Jiho to jump. But whether he was bluffing or not, Jiho claimed that during his peak, he could jump rope 100,000 times in one session. Hearing that, Jiho's face went pale. Another day passed, Jiho beyond and wondered where that annoying Jiho went. He hadn't come home all night. Suddenly, remembered something. He recalled that he'd exaggerated quite a bit yesterday. Could that Jo kid actually be trying to complete 100,000 jumps? But surely he wasn't that stupid. However, when Jo went up to the rooftop, his jaw hit the floor. Job was still there looking like a zombie on a caffeine overdose. He had done 47,000 jumps. Let's just pause and appreciate the Manhwa logic here. That is roughly 1 jump per second for 13 hours straight without water, bathroom breaks, or his kneecaps exploding to dust. But Job still had to put on an act, turning his back and saying that Joe was an idiot if he thought he'd become strong like him with just 100,000 rope jumps. Stop dreaming. Now stop and go wash the dishes. Back in the present, Joe was continuously throwing punches at the thug. The difference in skill level was obvious. The thug blocked one punch and immediately counterattacked. Jiho took the hit. The thug didn't want to drag this out, so after knocking Jiho down, he immediately tried to run. But Jiho was as persistent as a leech. He refused to let go and chased after him, wanting a fight to the death with this guy. The thug got angry, turned around and swung his fist into Jiho's face. Jiho fell, painfully clutching his face. The reason the thug was running was because he was afraid of getting caught alive. That would be the end of his life. But after taking just 3 steps, Jiho, still lying on the ground, grabbed his leg and wouldn't let him escape. That leg grab caused the thug to lose balance and tumble down the stairs. That fall must have hurt pretty badly. His whole body was trembling non-stop. Jiho quickly ran over and grabbed the thug again. Just when it seemed like he'd caught him, suddenly a sharp blade swept past Jiho's face. His eyes widened in shock. The thug, seeing he couldn't beat Jiho, had pulled out a weapon. Jiho's entire body froze. Now, understood what it felt like to face someone holding a knife. The thug had changed his mind. He told Jiho that he wasn't running because he was scared of him, and now he'd showed Jiho what regret meant. A flurry of slashes came at Jiho. He could only back up and dodge. With nowhere left to go, he tripped over some trash beside him. Taking advantage of that moment, the thug wanted to stab Jiho, but Jiho quickly grabbed a wooden plank nearby to block it, but the plank got cut in half. Seeing this, the thug felt gleeful. This time, Jiho was done for. The knife got closer and closer until a line of blood sprayed out. By this time, everyone in the house had woken up. Their heads were still a bit dizzy. Kim Taek saw the gas canister and immediately knew who tried to harm them. They still didn't know who had saved them. They wondered where that Jiho kid went. Jeob, sitting on the side, answered that Jiho went to catch the guy who released the gas. Kim Taek was skeptical and didn't believe in Jiho. If he went, it would be no different from walking to his death. Jeob turned his head confidently and said it wouldn't be like that. Earlier, when Jeob was still unconscious, Jiho had slapped his face to wake him up. In his hazy state, Jeob had promised Jiho that if he caught that bastard, Jeob would acknowledge him. That was why Jiho risked his life chasing down that street thug. But now, Jiho was realizing this task was beyond his capabilities. The knife came at him, but Jiho dared to use his hand to block it. This shocked the thug. Jiho was crazier than he thought. Jiho's face twisted into a grotesque smile, and it was time for his counterattack. In his eyes at that moment, determination overflowed. Jiho shouted loudly, grabbing the thug's arm with one hand while positioning his legs. The thug recognized this as the move had used, so he quickly countered it. In an instant, he was happy because he'd easily figured out Jiho's move. But that joy didn't last long before Jiho started laughing like a maniac. Jiho's real intention wasn't to throw him to the ground, but to push him off the railing down below using his own body as the pushing force. Both of them fell from above. The knife in the thug's hand also fell. Jiho couldn't avoid the pain from the fall either. The thug rolled several times before hitting the ground. After the painful fall, Jiho gritted his teeth and stood up. Looking to the side, he saw his opponent lying unconscious. Jiho picked up a brick nearby, planning to hit him in the head to make sure. But then he realized the guy no longer had the ability to fight. When they fell earlier, his head had accidentally hit an electric pole. Jiho collapsed to the ground, exhausted, gasping for air. He was happy because he'd achieved his first victory in life. Before, it only existed in his dreams. He never expected it to become reality. Suddenly, feeling something wet on his stomach, he looked down to see blood, lots of blood. It turned out that when they rolled down, the knife that fell from the thug's hand had accidentally stabbed straight into Jiho's stomach. Jiho lost consciousness from blood loss and passed out right next to the thug. When Jiho opened his eyes, he found himself in a hospital surrounded by Jeob and his friends. Luckily for him, the whole crew discovered them right away and rushed him to emergency care. Otherwise, his little life would have been hard to save. Despite Jiho still recovering from his injuries, Jeob still slapped him on the shoulder and praised him. When Jiho and the crew arrived, the thug had already been taken away. Although Jiho didn't catch the guy, Jiho would still acknowledge this victory, and he'd fulfill all the promises he'd made to Jiho. Even Kim Taek had acknowledged Jiho. After being missing for a while, Johan finally showed up. He smiled and told Jiho that he was lucky to survive. Now, he had to really learn how to fight. If he wanted to give up, he should say so now, standing before a great opportunity, a dream that Jiho longed for every night. How could he give up? Without hesitation, Jiho answered that after he got out of the hospital, he'd start learning immediately. After leaving the hospital, the people in the house showed their gratitude by fulfilling one of his dreams, a pork barbecue party. Kim Taek was grilling meat while telling him he should have asked for something bigger. Jiho ate like he'd never eaten before, grabbing food frantically because he really loved grilled meat. Jiho scratched his head and laughed awkwardly. If anyone saw this scene, they'd think they'd been starving him. Right after those words, Jiho's sobbing suddenly rang out, shocking everyone. Jiho immediately became the target of blame. It must be because he forced Jiho to eat canned tuna every day that the kid ended up like this. Jeob's mouth dropped open in protest. Everyone clearly agreed to this. Kim Taek walked over confused and explained that they were all runaways just like him. They were rough, so back then they couldn't share meat with some random kid who showed up to freeload. Jiho's eyes welled up with tears. He understood these things. He just never expected that living independently outside would be this difficult. He just wanted to live a normal life, but it turned out like this. Jeob was the first to respond. Did he think only he was suffering? They were all like him. Everyone here was the same. Some were also kicked out of their homes just like him, so they all understood how difficult it was to survive in society. If he had nowhere to go or if he didn't want to wander around out there, they wouldn't mind if he stayed. He also didn't need to worry about eating separately like before. Though if that happened, Job would probably have to start begging just to have enough to live on. But these guys were used to living freely, so it was fine. The others also smiled, as if agreeing with Job. At that moment, a warm feeling suddenly flowed through Jiho's body. It had been so long since he'd felt this warmth. After that, they all laughed together until they forgot about everything else. It had been so long since Jiho had laughed like that. After that incident, his life changed completely. Jiho no longer had to sleep in the laundry room, but now he had to sleep with a bunch of guys whose limbs were overdeveloped and whose sleeping habits were terrible. He wasn't sure if this was actually a good thing. The people in the house also started talking to him. Even though everyone was around the same age, he still wasn't used to it. Although they said to divide the housework, Jiho still handled most of the chores like before. In the end, everything was still pretty fair because the others all had part-time jobs to earn money. Only Jiho and Johan stayed home. Johan was yawning. Then he remembered he was supposed to teach Jiho how to fight. Jiho wondered why Johan didn't work at all, not even housework. Johan laughed. Of course, it was because he was the boss. Not long after, Johan got kicked out of the house by Job, who told him to go earn money. He said if Johan wanted to divide the housework, then he also had to work like them. Why was he listening to that Johan guy who couldn't even earn a single penny? After Jiho made money, Jael would teach him how to fight. Jiho was still confused when he saw Johan in the distance holding a broom and sweeping the house, cheering him on. So even the boss had to work after all. After that, Jiho was hired by a neighbor to work at a pizza shop in the alley. However, on just his second day, he already wanted to quit. He didn't understand why someone would come to a pizza shop and insist on ordering soju. The shop owner didn't teach him how to work properly and instead just kept yelling at him to do things, then cursing at him. Jiho finally understood what those runaways had to go through. It seemed he'd have to find another place. Just as he was about to run out of the store, the shop owner's daughter suddenly walked into the restaurant. Jiho was blown away by her beauty from first glance. But right at that moment, Naeum leaned in, smiled, and called him cute. And just like that, Jiho's face turned redder than the pizza sauce. It's hilarious how simple men are. One compliment from a pretty girl and suddenly the homelessness, the gang violence, and the trauma just evaporate. He went from, "I will destroy the underworld" to Employee of the Month in 0.5 seconds. That night, in an empty alley, Johan had just finished dealing with a group of people. He stepped on the head of the last guy still conscious and ordered him to call that person and tell him that if he didn't come, Johan would find and kill him himself. The next day, Jiho went to work and now impatiently taught him. He watched her spin pizza dough skillfully and thought to himself that she was so beautiful. Jiho was asked to open a jar of pickles, but he was so weak he couldn't even twist off the lid. But Noun didn't say a word of blame, she just gently opened it for him. Even when Jiho stupidly broke some dishes, Noun was the one who came to clean up for him. She didn't just ask if he was hurt, but also helped him keep it a secret from her father. She was truly an angel. It was only now that Jiho felt incredibly grateful to Kimtek for introducing him to such a wonderful job. Working with an angel was so lucky for him. If only there weren't those annoying customers, it would be even more perfect. But when you're dealing with customers, there's always going to be people like this. One customer was smoking inside the shop and got reminded by Noun. But instead of putting out his cigarette, he cursed at Noun. He even went so far as to throw his drink at her. Seeing this scene, Jiho couldn't keep calm anymore. He wanted to rush out and punch the guy. Just as he was about to run, the shop owner grabbed his arm and told him to wait a bit longer. Noun could handle this. Meanwhile, Noun just showed a professional smile and apologized to the customer. The shop owner then also went over to apologize and offered to get the customer a new drink. Jiho was surprised by the shop owner's attitude. He never expected the uncle would have to humble himself like that. After this incident, the store temporarily closed for a bit. It was only then that Jiho wondered why the owner behaved that way when his own daughter was being bullied. Nan, while drying her hair, said she was fine. The shop owner sighed with a troubled expression, asking Jiho what he was trying to teach him. Did he want to destroy his shop? Nan quickly defended Jiho and explained why they had to act that way. It was because this area had many dangerous organizations and it was very difficult for people to recognize how dangerous they were. That's why they had to be careful with customers like that earlier. Although sometimes people took advantage of this to run wild. The shop owner bowed his head helplessly. He didn't want to see his daughter treated like that either, but many shops had to close because they got harassed by them. He held his head in regret. This was his fault. When there was no other way to make money, if they wanted to survive here, they just had to endure. Nan looked at Jiho and smiled. She thanked him for caring, saying she was really okay. As long as their shop could keep operating here, she could go to school and her father could work. That was already good enough. Hearing these words touched Jiho's heart even more. Although Nan was the same age as him, she was so much more mature. Nan comforted her crying father, who felt helpless, and went back to work. When Jiho started adapting to his job, it was also time for his first lesson to begin. On the rooftop, Johan held a book with the demeanor of a skilled teacher. The first thing when hitting someone is you have to make fear disappear. Do you understand? Seeing Jiho just standing there frozen, Johan smacked the book against his face. Don't get cocky just because you won one fight. Do you think you'll catch them every time? If you can't catch them yourself, you won't win. Jiho naively asked what he should do then. Johan showed a sinister smile. No need to worry about that because he'd gradually improve. Then he suddenly wondered why Jiho's family hadn't come looking for him. Jiho gritted his teeth resentfully and answered that even if they came looking, he wouldn't go back. Hearing this, Johan just laughed mockingly. In the following days, Johan trained him until he was completely exhausted. He ran, jumped rope, did push-ups, squats, crunches, and all sorts of strange exercises. There wasn't an exercise in the world that he hadn't tried. But did these exercises actually work when he still couldn't throw a powerful punch? While Jiho was working hard training, his coach, Johan, was leisurely lying in one spot reading comics. Jiho, drenched in sweat, looked at him and said that these exercises were really good, but couldn't he win against them by doing anything other than these exercises? Johan made a confused face and looked at him. Didn't he already demonstrate it for him? Use the environment around you. Find weapons around you to block the opponent's movement and vision. That's all there is to it. But to do that, he had to go through grueling training. Johan realized this when he saw Jiho using those clumsy punches when fighting Park Jong-hoon, so train hard. Jiho complained that even so, he should at least teach him how to use his fist properly. He also wanted to punch and kick stylishly like professional boxers. As he spoke, he held up his phone showing a video of two boxing champions in a match. Johan jumped up about to smack the book on his head to wake him up. Was this idiot only paying attention to the flashy exterior? After saying that, he swung his arm holding the book at Jiho, but Jiho dodged it incredibly smoothly. This surprised both of them. Johan then threw a few more strikes. Sure enough, Jiho didn't need much effort to dodge them all. Johan laughed mockingly. Not bad. He knew how to teach him how to punch now. He'd use Jiho's own body directly. As he said that, he cracked his knuckles menacingly. Jiho looked at his actions and broke out in a cold sweat. A few days later, in an abandoned housing area, a young man wearing a helmet was trapped by a group of people. This group was the enemy faction opposing Johan. They were worried because lately Johan had been continuously harassing their side. Hyewon, their main fighter, had just finished dealing with the helmeted guy and laughed mockingly, asking what they wanted him to do. The helmeted guy was actually Hyung Tae. His crew cursed him as useless. Hyung Tae trembled as he looked at them and said he'd already told them he couldn't do it. Hyewon didn't care. He ruthlessly beat him like he was already dead. You said that so well. So why didn't you just leave back then? Why did you take the money? Hyung Tae screamed for them to stop, saying he'd return the money and begging them to spare him. Hyewon laughed mockingly. You don't need to waste your energy like that. Have you ever seen me let something like this go? As he spoke, he poked his stick into Hyung Hae's mouth. But I also need to save face, right? I don't want the bosses to find out. The crew behind him chimed in that if Kaiwan stepped forward, things would be much easier. Kaiwan ordered them to drag Johan's crew in front of him within 30 minutes. This was truly harder than climbing to heaven. Before they could say anything, Kaiwan was already hitting Hyung Tae to threaten them. The gang immediately ran off frantically to find Johan. A while later, Johan's house was found by them and they knocked on the door frantically. One guy in the group suddenly had an idea. How about they just deal with Hyewon instead? Only an idiot would think of that. Hyewon was even scarier than Johan. How could they possibly do that? Meanwhile, Jiho was walking dejectedly toward the shop, thinking about whether he should ask to switch to weekly pay. As he reached the shop, he suddenly noticed the shop's window had been smashed. It turned out Kaiwan's gang had come here and were trashing the place. The fat guy was grabbing the shop owner by the collar and yelling loudly, asking if he was close with Kim Taek. Did he really not know where Kim Taek went? The shop owner, covered in injuries, answered weakly that he truly didn't know. Hearing that, the guy asked someone on the phone if this was the right place. Meanwhile, Jiho was standing outside and got spotted by him. He shouted at that dog, asking what he was looking at. Jiho gritted his teeth in anger, looking at poor Nam. The fury inside him rose even higher. But right then, Nam told him to run away quickly. Naum was so different from Jiho. She was perfect and gentle. Unlike him, she could endure things he couldn't for such a long time. She was truly mature. After confirming with his crew that this was the right place, the guy turned his attention to Nan and demanded she reveal where Kim Taek worked. Nan insisted she didn't know. Meanwhile, Jiho couldn't stay calm anymore. He was having an intense internal struggle. Everyone had their own way of living. He wanted to act mature like Nan, but not in this situation. After thinking it through, a hot sauce was immediately sent flying into the fat guy's face. Under Nan's shocked gaze, Jiho glared at the fat guy and said he was a regular customer here. This fat guy was named Kim Tae, 17 years old, 5'11" tall, and weighing 242 pounds. It wasn't an exaggeration to say he was truly a giant. He was built with bulging muscles even though no one had ever seen him train. It seemed like Kim Tae was born to fight, which was why he'd been expelled from school. No one could be his match. But this was only true when he was still in school until he had the chance to face Kaiwan. Then everything changed. He thought that even outside, only Kaiwan would be worthy of being his opponent. But now, Kim Tae was speechless because it's his first time ever seeing a small loser daring to fight him. He spat on the ground and ordered Jiho to stop saying that fighting him would only lead to death. Jiho looked at his action and growled that he shouldn't spit on the floor, calling him a pig. Kim Tae froze, so this dog didn't get it yet. Well then, he'd have to make Jiho lick up the spit he just left. With that, he charged at Jiho. On the contrary, Jiho wasn't scared at all. In fact, he was looking forward to practicing everything he learned. The first thing when street fighting is knowing how to use objects around you to block your opponent's actions. Jiho quickly kicked a chair to block Kim Tae's path. The fat guy couldn't break in time and tripped. As the crash bottom a split second of time, Jiho's mind flashed back to the hellish training with Johan. He remembered the fear of standing frozen as Johan threw a barrage of strikes. He remembered the taunts, Johan mocking his paralysis, asking if he was ready to quit, but then came the breakthrough. Johan had demonstrated the mechanics of a true knockout blow. The left hand is just the curtain, it blinds them. The real power travels from your toes through your hips and explodes out of your right fist. Back in the present, the lesson took over. While Kim Tae was still reeling from the table impact, Jiho didn't freeze this time. He planted his foot, twisted his core, and unleashed the technique exactly as drilled. A perfect straight punch connected cleanly with Kim Tae's jaw. The room went dead silent. Naun and her father could only stare in shock. Jiho wasn't running away anymore. Meanwhile, Job was on the phone tearing into Johan for wasting time playing sensei. When Johan admitted he taught Jiho to fight so the kid could get revenge on his bullies, Job just laughed. Do you really think a rookie can beat seasoned street trash? He mocked, and the terrifying truth was, Jiho wasn't wrong. Back at the shop, reality hit hard. Jiho's perfect jab had landed, but against the massive bulk of the fatty Kim Tae, it was like hitting a brick wall. Kim Tae just scratched his head, grinned, and swung a haymaker that would have taken Jiho's head off. Jiho dodged, realizing the power gap was fatal. For 10 minutes, he played a desperate game of cat and mouse, landing strike after strike, but his stamina was draining fast. Kim Tae wasn't even hurt, he was laughing. Then, the inevitable happened. Jiho slowed down. Kim Tae snatched him by the collar and landed a single devastating punch. That one hit did more damage than Jiho's entire combo. Blood sprayed and Kim Tae lifted Jiho off the ground by his throat like a rag doll. Nawan tried to save him, but she was tossed aside with a casual flick of the wrist. As Jiho's vision faded and his eyes rolled back, he realized honor wouldn't save him here. He needed rule number 2, block their vision. With his last ounce of air, Jiho gathered everything he had and spat directly into Kim Tae's eyes. The giant recoiled, blinding and loosening his grip. Jiho hit the ground and immediately switched to rule number 3, anything is a weapon. He snatched a beer bottle from a crate and smashed it full force into Kim Tae's face. Glass exploded. Jiho didn't stop. With his hands bleeding and adrenaline masking the pain, he unleashed a barrage of straight punches. He'd survived a knife wound to the gut before. This pain was nothing. Finally, the giant crumbled. Jiho stood over him trembling. Come back here and I'll kill you. He snarled, sweeping the trash out of his life. He collapsed, utterly spent. He had won, but the nightmare wasn't over. 2 more of Kim Tae's crew walked in looking for their boss only to find him laying in the ground. They thought it was the shop owner's doing, but a voice cut through the silence. "I did it," Jiho rasped. He forced himself back up, swaying like a ghost. He was ready to fight 2 fresh opponents just to prove the training worked. Naeon watched in horror as Jiho prepared to die on his feet. But before he could throw the first punch, the atmosphere shifted. Kim Tae stood in the doorway. He took one look at the ruined shop and the injured family, and his expression went dark. The savior had arrived. Jiho wondered why he came here. Kim Tae tied his hair back, then turned to look at the remaining 2 and asked in a deep voice which one wanted to die first. As expected of the older brother of the family, the 2 of them couldn't withstand even one punch from him. The guy in the black shirt didn't even get to touch him before he was sent flying by Kim Tae's punch. The other one shared the same fate. Jiho watched Kim Tae's fight with wide eyes, thinking to himself that brother Kim Tae's was also incredibly strong. In just a few minutes, they'd been beaten until their faces were deformed. Kim Tae grabbed the black shirt guy by the collar and forced him to reveal who was behind this. Terrified, he'd die in Kim Tae's hands. The guy quickly spilled everything. It was all because of Ki-woon. He had nothing to do with the gas incident. He begged him not to hit him. Right after those words, Kim Tae kicked him in the mouth. Looking at the bastard lying unconscious on the ground, Kim Tae angrily said it was definitely caused by those Han Kwang guys. Jiho unconsciously remembered Hyung Tae's words back then. This was probably the organization he'd mentioned. Everyone living here knew full well that the security in this area was terrible. Crime kept increasing to the point where even the police had to give up. Gang members and organized crime chose this place to conduct illegal transactions. That organization had been dealt with by a group of runaway teenagers in this area, and they were called Han Kwang. Those criminal organizations had joined Han Kwang and managed this area. And a vicious person everyone knew about who belonged to Han Kwang was Ki-woon. Maybe Jiho's family and Kim Tae were also being targeted because they'd obstructed their area management work. Kim Tae wondered how did they come to the pizza place. The shop owner finally spoke up and explained that Ki-woon had already put his eyes on this place. Kim Tae frowned, wondering why the uncle hadn't told him. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but that he couldn't because there was nothing they wouldn't dare do. The image of a grand shop sinking into a sea of flames was stuck in the uncle's head. There was no electrical accident. It was Han Kwang who'd caused it. Hearing this, the murderous aura emanating from Kim Tae grew stronger. He understood this feeling the uncle's family had. It was just like when Jiho was at school. Naewon trembled as she thanked him. She was scared to the point of tears. This was also the first time Jiho had seen the strong, mature Naluan cry. This society had too many bad people. There was nowhere without those thugs. News of the pizza shop being destroyed finally reached Jae-ob's ears. Kim Tae called him to report that Han Kwang was also targeting them. Needed to find a way to deal with them. He also knew how dangerous Ki-woon was. But first, they needed a good plan. Right at that moment, Job suddenly noticed a shop being destroyed. The gangsters were laughing gleefully while smashing the place. The grandmother and grandson who owned the shop could only hold each other and cry. The scene was heartbreaking. Job immediately hung up the phone. Across the street, the gangster held his stick threateningly over the grandmother and grandson, demanding to see the old man. The grandmother could only fearfully hold her young grandson and explained that because of her poor health, making money was a bit difficult. The thug didn't distinguish between young and old. He was about to bring the stick down on their heads when luckily, Job arrived in time and blocked it. The guy immediately took a punch to the face. The others saw their comrade get hit and temporarily stopped destroying the shop to face Job. Relying on their numbers, they sneered at Job, asking if he dared interfere with their business. They were Han Kwang. So what? Han Kwang or whatever. Job didn't care. He jumped up and kicked their faces. Just a few minutes later, the entire crew was lying on the ground, completely beaten down. Job turned to check on the grandmother and grandson. The little boy suddenly shouted a warning about something behind him, but it was too late. Job had taken a hit. Kaiwan's baseball bat had struck his butt. Kaiwan didn't come alone. He'd brought many lackeys behind him. Blood from Job's head dripped down to his chin as Kaiwan's laughing that he finally found Johan's dog. That night, everyone gathered at home. Hongwyong angrily pointed at Kim Tae, saying he should have just run away. Whatever they wanted to do with that pizza shop was their business. Why did he have to interfere with Hong Kong's affairs? Kim Tae looked at her sincerely and apologized for doing this. But that pizza shop was really good. If that shop closed, what would he do? Song Bin standing nearby also nodded in agreement. Hong was truly fed up with these idiotic men. She shouted angrily about what they'd do if they had to face those guys. Ji-ho was stunned. He didn't expect everyone to be this tense. At that moment, spoke up wondering why Jaeb hadn't come home yet. Right then, all four of their phones simultaneously received a message. It was an image of Jaeb tied up, covered in blood with text saying, "Abandoned construction site near the forest." Hong Young gritted her teeth and cursed. At the same time, at the abandoned construction site where Jaeb was being held, Ki-woon slapped him a few times and asked why his friends weren't coming. If they didn't show up in 10 minutes, he'd kill him. Before he could finish, Jaeb interrupted saying to go ahead and kill him. If he died, they'd have one less mouth to feed. That would be great, wouldn't it? Ki-woon glared and raised his bat, but the group of four had already appeared. Kim Taek spoke up saying they came to face Han Kwang. Shortly before, on the way there, Kim Taek had suddenly turned back to advise Ji-ho to go home. Of course, Ji-ho couldn't abandon his teammates and go home alone. Seeing him so stubborn, Kim Taek challenged him back. Was he confident he'd be helpful? Returning to the present moment, Hong Jie-young hissed under her breath. There were too many of them, over 15 at least. Without beating around the bush, Kim Taek asked directly where Jaeb was. They jerked their faces toward Kaiwan. Jaeb raised his head to look at everyone and rasped that they shouldn't have come. He alone was enough to take care of these guys. Right after those words, Kaiwan struck Jaeb's head with his bat again. Seeing this scene, the Yohan family was furious. Kaiwan laughed provocatively and stepped on Jaeb's face. Wasn't the Yohan family supposed to be strong? Where was that Yohan guy? Why wasn't he coming? It was because they trusted him too much that things turned out like this. Kim Tae-kei gritted his teeth hard, but before he could speak, little Hong was quicker. What are you barking about, you dog? Hey, you scruffy bearded loser. Don't use numbers to bully people anymore. She pointed straight at his face without a trace of fear. You guys are truly filthy. It was the first time anyone had dared curse at him so directly. Kaiwan's face darkened as he looked at her and told her to shut her mouth. He then told his crew to grab them. With that, the entire Han Kwang gang charged at them simultaneously. Ji-ho nervously broke out in a cold sweat. Although the Yohan family was very strong, could they really take down this many people? Looking at the other members each fighting two, even 3 people at once, Ji-ho was even more shocked. Kim Taek with his precise kicks had successfully pushed back 3 people at once. Song Bin on this side was no slouch either, with extremely fast dodging ability combined with incredibly accurate counterattacks. Right then, one guy suddenly noticed Ji-ho and Hong standing still in one spot and called his teammates to quickly grab those two. Without thinking, following instinct, Ji-ho immediately ran forward to shield Hong. This situation would only make sense if the person behind him was Nan or an ordinary female student. But who was behind him? It was Hong Jie-young, the person who dared talk back to Ki-woon himself. She immediately pushed Ji-ho back, then quickly slipped behind her opponent and wrapped her arms around his waist. What followed was a pro-level throw. Ji-ho watched her move with his mouth hanging open, not understanding why he tried to protect her earlier. Hong did some stretching and casually looked at the rest, asking which one had just said they wanted to grab her. Now Hong had joined the fight. Ji-ho was confused. He also had to fight, but he didn't know if there was anyone at his level. His wish was immediately granted when someone got sent flying right in front of him. Meanwhile, Kim Taek was fighting intensely when he suddenly sensed a sharp aura from behind. Sure enough, his instincts were correct. It was Ki-woon, and he dared to play dirty with a sneak attack. If it weren't for his quick reflexes, Kim Taek's blood would probably be staining that bat by now. Although the earlier strike didn't hit a vital spot, it was enough to injure Kim Taek's leg. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ki-woon immediately engaged in close combat with Kim Taek's. Ji-ho was still struggling with the guy from earlier. He was too fast, just dodging alone was exhausting enough. Ji-ho accidentally backed into the oil drum they were using to burn a fire. He quickly grabbed the burning piece of wood and struck his opponent with it. But the guy still hadn't been taken down yet. Everyone stopped fighting. A voice suddenly rang out, freezing everyone's movements for a moment. It turned out the guy from earlier had grabbed Ji-ho. His life was now being threatened. Just one more movement and the glass shard would slice his carotid artery. Ji-ho's neck was bleeding. Seeing everything on his side, Kaiwan became even more excited. If you don't want your friend to die, kneel down quickly. He looked at Kim Taek and laughed gleefully. Why aren't you charging forward like earlier? Kim Taek lowered his head, his arms hanging limply. Seeing his current state, Ki-won laughed even harder. You dogs are hilarious. You won't fight anymore just because of this worthless kid? That's exactly why you ended up in this situation. Ji-ho, under the sharp point of the glass shard, didn't complain once. Iwan held his bat and tapped it a few times on Kim Taek's head. It's such a shame you ignored them to fight me. Thanks to that, I've secured victory. Answer carefully if you don't want to end this life of wandering with a pile of debt. Kim Taek laughed mockingly, saying Ki-eun underestimated him too much. Before Ki-eun could process those words, Kim Taek had already landed a fast punch to his face. Going back to the moment when Kim Taek advised Ji-ho to go home, Ji-ho looked at him with determined eyes and said in a firm voice that if he got caught, the others should just ignore him. Right when Kim Taek struck, the guy threatening Ji-ho couldn't believe his eyes. He didn't think they'd actually dare sacrifice Ji-ho. Taking advantage of the opening, Ji-ho used his hand to block the glass shards stabbing toward his neck. They'd made a mistake choosing him as a hostage. Ji-ho was someone who'd written his will. After all this messing around, it was nothing to him. Kim Tae-kwan with an extremely relaxed mindset because he had faith in Ji-ho that he'd be the craziest one in their group. After using his own body as a weapon, Ji-ho had successfully taken down one guy under his teammates' surprised gazes. Kim Taek lowered his head to look at Ki-woon beneath his feet. Did you think we were easy to bully? Ki-woon rubbed the side of his face that had just been hit. Did they think they'd already won? He quickly stood up and charged at Kim Taek again. Kim Taek used his leg to kick and Ki-woon immediately blocked with his bat. The two of them went back and forth, one advancing while the other retreated. Kim Tae worried to himself, couldn't he do anything about this guy? Ki-woon was making things difficult for him with that baseball bat. Moreover, this guy was cautious to the point where Kim Tae couldn't dodge while planning his next move. He just needed to land the finishing blow correctly once. Just as Kaiwan charged forward with his bat, Kim Tae was held back by two of his lackeys. One locked his arms while the other held his legs. It was truly disaster after disaster. What seemed like it would be a sad ending for Kim Tae, but no. Ji-ho always knew how to shine when needed. He'd quickly grabbed a piece of wood and struck Ki-woon's head hard enough that the wood broke in two. Ji-ho gasped for breath. Even he didn't think he'd dare do this to Ki-woon. Ki-woon's face darkened as he muttered, "These dogs don't know their place anymore." His hands, still gripping the piece of wood, began to tremble. Ji-ho tried to calm himself. Even though Kaiwan was strong, don't be scared, he'd already hit him. Now he wasn't afraid of them anymore. Kaiwan walked step by step toward Ji-ho. His entire body emanated a terrifying murderous aura. His eyes reddened with bloodshot veins and his voice was cold enough to numb someone. "Did you really want to fight me?" Ji-ho's whole body froze. He felt like he couldn't breathe because this guy he was completely different from anyone Ji-ho had ever faced. Ji-ho wasn't tall to begin with and standing with Kaiwan made him look even smaller. If he fought him, he'd die. His body stiffened just like it used to back in school. Seeing Ji-ho's pale face, Kaiwan smiled with satisfaction, then immediately swung his bat into Ji-ho's stomach with a warning not to get cocky with him. Ji-ho bent over and started dry heaving. Maybe he was so scared he couldn't move. After dealing with Ji-ho, Kaiwan turned back to finish off Kim Taek. But what he didn't expect was that while he was preoccupied with Ji-ho, the Johan family had quickly dealt with all his lackeys. He was still in shock. Did they take down all his crew? But fighting 3-on-1 like this was really cowardly. Hearing this, Hong Young wanted to poke his face a few times. All three of them simultaneously charged at Ki-won. He aimed at Song Bin and swung his bat. With his speed and flexibility, Song Bin quickly slipped behind him and punched hard into his back, but he still didn't stop. Song Bin was now standing right under his bat, not knowing how to handle the situation. Luckily, Kim Tae quickly climbed up and grabbed Ki-woon by the neck. But this guy wasn't that easy to deal with. Even while being grabbed, he still had enough strength to kick Song Bin backward. Not stopping there, Hong joined in and grabbed his support leg, intending to throw him down. Quickly switched the bat to his other hand and knocked Hong away with it. He continued grabbing Kim Taek's wrist and threw him forward. Although the three of them could still keep fighting, their stamina had depleted significantly. They needed to continue using their numerical advantage. Kaiwan looked at them smugly. This was the last privilege he'd give them. "All of you kneel at my feet." As expected, it was that stubborn girl who spoke up again, asking if he'd been hit in the head and gone stupid, telling him that she only kneels to God. Ki-won laughed mockingly, then struck hard at the metal shelf behind him. "I gave you all one last chance to survive and you didn't take it." As expected, he laughed like that for a reason. Another squad had assembled here and surrounded them. Kim Tae-kei gritted his teeth. How many of them were there really? Ki-woon glared and ordered his lackeys to attack. Less than 5 minutes later, Hong and Sung-bin had been defeated. Kim Tae was now having to kneel before Ki-woon. Ki-woon smiled, dropping a bombshell that froze the air in the room. Here's a fun fact, he taunted. My crew told me the pizza owner lied about where you were, so I sent a friend to give him a little reminder. You might know him, Jun Sung-bo, aka Han Kwang's arsonist. Kim Tae screamed, begging him to stop, but Ki-woo didn't care. He pulled out his phone, ready to make the call that would burn everything to the ground. But before his thumb could hit dial, a sharp pain shot up his leg. He looked down in total confusion. It was Jiho. Since his hands were useless, Jiho decided to switch to the zombie strategy. He clamped down on Kaiwan's calf like it was a forbidden drumstick at an all-you-can-eat buffet. Kaiwan wasn't amused. He stomped heavily on Jiho's head to shake him off. What the hell is wrong with you? Spit it out, he roared. Blood sprayed across the concrete as the boot connected, forcing Jiho to release his grip. He was barely conscious, but he was still fighting. Jiho thought to himself that this bastard was truly terrifying. But should the shop have to disappear because of him? So what would happen to Nan? Jiho suddenly shouted that he wouldn't allow him to touch that shop. After saying that, Jiho bit down hard on his leg. Ignoring that his mouth and nose were bleeding together and flowing down Ki-woon's leg, Ki-woon was truly shocked by Jiho's attitude. Not letting this drag on any longer, he decisively grabbed his bat and kicked Jiho away. Then he continued scrolling to find Jun Sung-bo's number. He called his friend, planning to tell him to burn down that pizza shop, when he suddenly realized this voice didn't seem to be his friend's. Moreover, it sounded somewhat familiar. Not making Ki-woon and his crew wait long, the arsonist corpse was immediately thrown in front of the door, and the person on the phone was still chatting with him. Jun Sung-bo lay before them looking like a broken mess, missing one eye. A pair of familiar Converse appeared before them. So this is your arsonist. Why do we need to deal with so many people lately? Sure enough, the person holding Sung-bo's phone was Johan. His expression looked extremely terrifying. Looking at his teammates lying scattered on the ground, his tone became even colder. Johan declared that today, even if they cried and begged, he would show no mercy.
Alright, that's the end of the story. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.